All right, so why don't we start with a little background? When did your wrestling career start? Who did you start training with, and then who did you start with training with jiu-jitsu?
I started wrestling kind of late for most guys. Most guys start wrestling in junior high. I didn't start wrestling until my sophomore year in high school when I was 15 years old, and that was 18 years ago, so it's been a while. But I wrestled in Tillersville High School out here in Utah, and also wrestled at Brigham Young University down in Provo, Utah under Mark Schultz. And Mark Schultz was Olympic champion in freestyle wrestling, and he was also Ultimate Fighting champion, as well as he eventually got a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. And so while I was at BYU, Schultz had us training Jiu-Jitsu on a pretty regular basis just for kind of a different look, kind of cross-training type thing. And at the time I really didn't like it. It kind of pissed me off, actually, to tell you the truth, just because I was like, man, I want to be an All-American wrestler. I don't want to waste my time on this jiu-jitsu stuff. But it kind of started growing me a little bit, and then after I got done with my wrestling and my church mission, I came back home and picked up jiu-jitsu and have continued that along with my wrestling ever since.
So which championships have you recently won?
Recently I won a tournament here locally in Utah back in March, which I coincidentally got dinged up at a little bit with one of my training partners, Noah Jenkins. He's a really tough guy, but I won that tournament, Utah Grappling Championships, and then also same month in March I won the Pancrase Submission Wrestling World Championships for the super heavyweight. So those are my most recent, at least for as far as this year. And over the past couple of years I've won 2 silver medals in the 2008-2009 FILA World Grappling Championships, and also won a bronze medal in the brown belt division at the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Federation World Championships with the gi. So I know what I'm doing with the gi too, guys. Not just no gi wrestling guy.
So how long have you been competing then in jiu-jitsu?
Started competing in jiu-jitsu back in 2004. Actually competed in the Pancrase Submission Wrestling National Championships that year, and it was kind of a chance that I did. I met my longtime grappling coach, Sheldon Marr of Grappler's Edge. He's out in Denver, Colorado, and he's one of my coaches that I really look up to, as well as being one of the U.S. Grappling team's official coaches too. So I had a great opportunity to work with him over the years, but he was basically how I got started in competition. I was kind of really wondering, hey, when am I going to compete? And he called me up and said, hey, we need a heavyweight, you want to come up and try it? And at the time I was out training Greco-Roman wrestling at the Olympic Center, and so I was a little leery of trying it out, but I said, oh, what the heck, I'll just go for it. What's the worst that can happen? I'll just tap out if I need to. So went and tried it out and won the tournament and had a great time, and I've just been competing in grappling and jiu-jitsu and everything else ever since. So
I like that. Won the tournament and had a great time. So which big names in jiu-jitsu that people would recognize have you gone against, and then maybe even some names from wrestling that people might recognize?
Gosh, let's see. I've gone against quite a few good guys. I went against Jason McDonald. He's a UFC fighter. I'm not sure how active he is lately, but went against him in the Abu Dhabi trials back in 2004. Jamal Patterson as well, that tournament. Went up against
Jeff Monson.
Jeff Monson, thank you. And that was a great experience. Few little different changes in paying attention, and I think that match would have come out a lot different, but that's the way it goes with competition. And Mario Rinaldi, he was another really tough guy that I competed against. And
you faced Kayron Gracie at one of those tournaments?
Yeah, gosh, that's another one that was
the Sting.
This close, yeah. I was actually beating him on points. It was 2-0. I'd gotten a takedown and had been working to pass his guard, and I got a little bit lazy with my posture, and he just kept creeping those hands up on my lapel, and I was like, man, I was this close. So, but that was a good competition to see what level I'm at, and I think I've been able to definitely prove that I'm on a world-class level as far as the grappling sports are concerned. So it's really been a lot of fun.
So when you're training up for an event, what kind of training partners will you train with? Do you cross-train a little bit like with Sambo, or for example, or do you train a lot with wrestlers, or do you stick pretty closely to jiu-jitsu now, or?
That's a good question. Right now, I'm kind of in a good position, but a weird position. Right now, I've got a little warehouse space in downtown Salt Lake City that I've opened up with Jake Shannon of Scientific Wrestling, and so I pick his brain a little bit. And then, of course, we've got Team Machado with Dave Johnson and Jeff Coons and Gerald Harris. That, we bounce stuff of each other and get help from those guys, and then also go and train with Fusion Academy with Eddie Edmonds. He's another local guy, and train with his guys. And Mike Colby, he's one of my favorites. Mike Colby is one of the guys that I consider the gold standard as far as grappling is concerned. I just have to say that, and Dave's cringing over here laughing and giving me a bad time. But really, Mike, honestly, he gives me a harder time than a lot of those guys that I just mentioned as far as competition-wise. So I don't know if it's because he was my instructor from the past or what it is, but every time I go against a guy, it seems like I forgot something and he's learned something. So he's always a good test. But I really like to have different training partners. And I know that sounds maybe bad for some guys because they loyalty and all this kind of stuff. For me, I'm like, what? The competition, you're going to compete against, who knows, maybe 5, 6 different guys from different schools that do different stuff, dealing with half guard, full guard, no guard, upside down banana in your face guard. I don't know. Just weird stuff, right? So I like to get as much exposure to different training partners and situations as I can. So that's kind of my philosophy. And then, of course, I've got my core group of guys over at my place. I've got Kofi Azitso. He's fought in King of the Cage. He's a really tough MMA guy. We've been bringing him along the last few years in grappling. We're going to go test him out at some of the NAGA tournaments coming up here. And then another guy of mine, Corey Cummings, and Casey Jackson. He's also an MMA guy. And Jeremy Hunt Lovelace, he's a veterans wrestling champion. He's done very well with wrestling in the past. So I've got a good handful of guys that come train with me. And so yeah.
Awesome. You may have already mentioned this, but when did you get your black belt, and who was your black belt from?
I got my black belt under Jeff Coons, and Jeff is a Ricky Machado black belt, and I got my black belt December 13th, 2008. I remember the day very well, so it was a great day.
So a lot of people will say that that people at your level will say that it's a waste of time to train with lower level people, maybe white, blue, early purple belt students. How do you feel about just getting out on the mat and rolling with a beginner or somebody who's just up and coming? Do you feel there's a benefit to that?
Yeah, that's a good question. Actually, my philosophy has definitely been developing over the last few years, and from a wrestling standpoint, you always want to go with the best guys, but I mentioned before Mike Colby, he's a Walt Bayless Jiu-Jitsu black belt, and his philosophy is completely different than that. His philosophy is one that your training, the majority of your training really should be, technique based and learning how to develop your skills and putting yourself in bad situations and being able to get out of them. So his philosophy is your time against the toughest guys should really be very small, and more time should be spent in technique and conditioning and other things. And from seeing those two different standpoints, I really have found value in both. I think I'm leaning more towards Mike's philosophy these days, just because from a grappling standpoint, it's a different pace. Greco-Roman wrestling is a totally different pace than a grappling or a jiu-jitsu type pace. And you're not always banging, you're not always just trying to push a guy around like you are in Greco. With the grappling, there's a lot of positions where you're trying to put some energy back into the system to make things move, and there's a lot of squirming and moving. And so I think with the lower level guys, you can definitely learn a lot. You can definitely still develop. It might be a little bit harder in some situations, but overall, I think for long-term grappling training, as well as learning some of your your sticking points, I think training with the lower level guys helps a lot.